Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a great pleasure to introduce our speaker today. Amanda Lamb was the class of '84 at Episcopal, and she was, as she told me this morning, our first girl. Starting at the Devon campus in third grade, she was one of two girls, and on the very first day of coeducation, she raised the flag at the Devon campus with Mr. Bob Bishop here in the front row presiding, as he was the head of Devon at that time. Amanda was the sole survivor. That other girl did not graduate, so that makes her the first girl at Episcopal. And she eventually was joined by 20 other girls who came from third grade on through the rest of the school and graduated with that class in 1984. Also in that class was Mrs. Mrs. Kim Farrell, Robin's mom, who many of you will know. Amanda was the first girl to win a debate at Episcopal, and she was the first girl to win a public speaking prize. And it's no wonder that she went on to become a professional television journalist, as well as an author and a mother. After graduating from Episcopal, she received her undergraduate degree from Duke University, and then her master's degree in journalism from Northwestern. Today, she's making her mark both as a television journalist and as a writer. Amanda writes in two completely different genres, one about her life at home and one that mirrors the life of a hard news reporter with 22 years of experience. She covers the crime beat for an award-winning CBS affiliate, WRAL in Raleigh, North Carolina. Over the years, Amanda's developed a reputation as the go-to reporter for networks seeking credible feedback and interviews on high-profile murder cases in the Southeast. She makes regular appearances on CBS, Fox, CNN, True TV, and on the Oxygen Network. Amanda's two most recent books are Love Lies, a crime novel published in 2011, and I Love You to God and Back, an inspirational journey through parenting and faith between a parent and her young daughter, published earlier this year. Please rise to welcome Amanda back home to Episcopal Academy.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So I have to add that not only was I the first girl, but I was a legacy at Episcopal. My dad, Bill Lamb, who's here today, and my great-grandfather. And I'm not the last girl from my family, because somewhere in this audience is my niece, Lily Stapleton. Lily, where are you? So I'm not the last girl from our family. Now, when I started at the Devon campus back in 1974, we didn't have a chapel, so we didn't have the opportunity to come to a beautiful place like this and worship. We actually, as Bob Bishop reminded me, did our first chapel services outside. So as you can imagine, it got pretty cold pretty quickly. And then we moved inside, and eventually we moved into a multi-purpose building. But then I went down to the Marion campus, where we, of course, had a beautiful chapel. And I don't remember, to be honest with you, I don't remember a lot of specifics about chapel. But one of the things that I do remember was that we had so many different speakers, diverse speakers with diverse points of view. And that's very, very rare and unusual, and especially in today's world that's so polarized. So I've written a book about prayer. It's called I Love You to God and Back. And I have some for sale in the back when we're done, if your parents are interested. I spent a year taping my daughter's prayers. Now, she was 6 at the time. She's 9 now. And basically, I was writing a book for her and I to keep. But as I started writing this book, I realized that there was a lot of wisdom there. And it wasn't just something for me, but maybe for other families and other parents who might be able to learn from our experience. So I'll read you just a little excerpt from I Love You to God and Back. So basically what we did is we recorded the prayers, and then I would write about them. And my daughter, Chloe, is a very spiritual child, and she's taught me a lot. So this is called The Sunny Spot. Chloe recently told me on the beach one day that if there's a ray of sunshine peeking through a cloud, you should smile at it, and that God will help the sun push through the clouds. It really works, Mommy. Watch, she said as she stood there in her little blue and green fringe bikini, eyes squinting as she looked directly into the sunny spot. The lifeguard overheard her explaining the process to me and stopped to help. He stood next to her at attention, his hands at his side, and stared at the spot. "Is it working?" he said, talking out of the side of his mouth to Chloe. But keeping his eyes firmly on the spot, "Yes, yes," she said, as the ray seemed to push a little harder through the clouds, with a little more intensity than before. I fell in beside them, figuring why not? All my complaining about the weather over the years had gotten me absolutely nowhere. Maybe God just wanted a little smile and some thanks for the sunshine. As the lifeguard, Chloe, and I continued to stand at rapt attention, I continued to feel his warmth. God's warmth, not the lifeguard, by the way. That would be strange. So this book is actually my 6th book. As the lovely introduction that Mr. Clark gave indicates, I'm a crime reporter, which is kind of a strange mix for somebody then writing a Christian book. But I talk about the fact in most of my speeches that I have this work life, which is very stressful and intense, and I write about some very serious, disturbing things. And then I have a home life. I have 2 little girls. One is in 7th grade and one's in 4th grade. I've written a couple books about them and some humorous books, but this is my first Christian book, and I really never set out to write a Christian book. But in many ways, it's more than a book. It's a journey. It's a journey between a parent and a child, and it's a journey that really challenged me. Because what it did was it challenged me to evaluate my beliefs and my spirituality and my Christianity. Because children approach faith with an open heart. Adults, we have a lot of skepticism. And we don't have a lot of room for accepting things blindly. We have to question and challenge everything, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that. But seeing faith through a child's eyes gives us a different perspective because of their open heart. My daughter is thankful for absolutely everything. Our prayers are endless. She talks about the bunny that she saw running across our path on a morning walk. She talks about getting a popsicle at school. She talks about playing with her friends. She's also very concerned about the world around her, and I know you've learned a lot about this at Episcopal, about how important community is, and it can't just be the community here at Episcopal, the community in your neighborhood, but we have to reach out and we have to help others. And Chloe talks a lot about, in her prayers, about caring for people who are sick, caring for people who went through a natural disaster, a tsunami, a hurricane, something that she might have seen on the news. Because of course she does watch the news because her mom's on the news. She also praises God for the world around her, for natural beauty. I mean, I look out this window right here, and it's amazing to me what you guys have every single day on this campus. The trees, the grass, the sunshine, it's a beautiful place. Now, I wish I could take credit for this. I raised her going to church. She sits at the dinner table and does prayers. She does bedtime prayers. But I think in many ways, a faithful heart is something that we're born with. So for example, just like brown hair or blue eyes, it's something that you have inside of you. And so not unlike a parent would encourage you as a soccer player or a dancer or a piano player, it was important to me to encourage my daughter's spirituality. But again, in that process, I learned a whole lot. My daughter didn't want to do rote prayers. She wanted to talk to God. And I said this in the earlier service. Some of the adults will understand. I said, talk to God? I'm an Episcopalian. I don't know what that means. We do prayers. We do prayers that we memorize. So this was very different for me. One of the funny things about children and God is that they have a whole lot of questions. And so I encourage my kids to ask questions. One of the things that my kids have always asked me about is, what does God control? Well, God controls nature. So to that, one of my daughters said to me one day, well, why is it raining? Doesn't he know I'm in my bathing suit on the way to the pool? Another recent event, we had bought them pumpkins, the little kind of small pumpkins that you buy at the grocery store. And one of those pumpkins rotted, and my daughter said to me, well, why did God smash my pumpkin? So I started to try to get more specific about what God is in charge of. They also asked me, where did God live? And I would point up, like this, thinking that they would understand that meant heaven. And of course, they thought that meant the attic. So that actually worked well for a while because God was really close. So when they did something wrong, I could be like, he's right there, right there. It's a pull-down attic, so they started getting concerned about what would happen in a fire and things like that. My daughter, I would say, well, God is always with us. He's around us. And she said, Mom, there's just not enough room in my bed for God. He's going to have to sleep on the trundle bed. Eventually, we settled on God is in heaven, and my daughter, Chloe, said, well, that's a really long way away, Mom, so I think that I love you so much, I love you to God and back. And that's where we got the title for the book. And in fact, my publisher wanted to change it to Heaven and Back because he said, well, God isn't a place. Heaven's a place. And I said, no. In her heart, God's a place. And that was important to me to keep that title. Now, I have a middle schooler, so I do know something about what you guys are dealing with. I read her texts. I'm on Instagram. It mortifies her that her mother's on Instagram. But, my older daughter doesn't want to say prayers out loud. In fact, she's never wanted to say prayers out loud because she's too cool. But in addition to that, that's just not her thing. And, I have said to her on many occasions, that's okay. You don't have to say your prayers out loud. God hears you sitting right here in this chapel. God hears you in your bed at night. God hears you wherever you are. And again, those words don't have to be spoken out loud. So I've encouraged her to have a private prayer life because I know that she's just not going to be that child like my younger child who's willing to talk about prayer. What's really important about having a prayer life is starting a conversation with God. Because if you picture it this way, if you've never talked to God, and then you have something really hard happen in your life, really tough, some adversity, which many of you probably already have had, and you say, hey, God, I've never really talked to you before, but I've got this problem. It's a little awkward. It would be better for you to have that conversation started so that you would know how to talk to God when you get to those moments in your life. So my daughter encouraged me, not only challenged me to reconsider and think about my faith and what I believe, not just because of the way I grew up, because I was a cradle Episcopalian, but because of events in my life. What did I really believe? But she also encouraged me to start that conversation with God and have a relationship with God. Now, what's really interesting is my book came out in April, beginning of April, and on April 20th, my mother was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. So all of a sudden, this conversation that I had started with God became very, very important. Now, my mom was a very spiritual person. She believed in God. She believed that she was going to heaven. This gave her strength throughout her 80-day battle with brain cancer, of which I was a part of every step of the way. I, on the other hand, was a little angry at God, if you can imagine that, because it's hard to watch somebody that you love suffer and maintain your faith. So I was struggling, and my relationship with him was very strained. And I asked questions like, why does God let somebody who's a good person suffer? Why does he allow this? And of course, the answer, which is hard for all of us to understand when we go through tough times in our life, is that God doesn't allow it. God doesn't make it. It just happens. But again, that's where the conversation becomes very important. Now, I have a confession to make. God and I are still in some difficult negotiations. And it's a daily struggle for me to still reconcile my experience that I went through. But the good thing is that we are in conversation because I have had that as a foundation in my life. And so we continue to talk even when our spirituality is challenged and questioned. After my daughter and I wrote this book, I interviewed her because I'm a journalist, and I asked her some of her thoughts on God and on prayer, and I think probably my favorite one was the most simple and profound. I said, just describe God to me. And she said, God is like a smile shining down on you. He's like the lights going through your heart. He's been here for 1,000,000 years, so he's probably not going to quit helping us. You just know God is here because he's in your heart. And when you're sad, you can feel him. That's pretty profound coming from a 6-year-old, I thought. One of my favorite quotes in the church service is the peace of God which passes all understanding. I kind of get a chill every time I hear that. I believe in my heart that prayer can bring us closer to that peace, one step at a time. Amen. Thank you.